So the first thing I want to do is talk about how do we understand our readings. We're throwing a lot of things in a year-long master's program. Some of us read and speak multiple languages, so there's some uh, great things that come with that, but also challenges. And some of the ideas that we have might be in the readings might be really abstract or just presented in a way that we're not familiar with. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is how many times do you read your texts for the modules that you're in? This will also include reading for your literature review and your analysis for your dissertation. And how frequently do you highlight or underline? A lot of times people will take time to read and then they will highlight while they read, and that's fine. But then they look at it later and it looks kind of like a circus poster. Everything is highlighted. And so the reading, the suggestion I have here is a process where you don't just read the text all at once, but you read it multiple times, but in very short segments and for different purposes and reasons. And so what I'm going to do is just show you these different rounds of reading. Now, this is a collection of multiple different patterns of reading that have come from places like Stanford and other universities. So I wouldn't say this is one particular project, but it is something that I find students appreciate. I didn't know how to really do readings until PhD school, where I had to kind of read them in a very different way than I had prior to that. So when I say read it 4 times, I'm sure your heart stops a little bit, but just I want you to think about that's how many times maybe you should read it and how that what that looks like. So if we go into round one, I've highlighted here an article that has a headline, right, or a title. Sorry, I'm a journalist, so everything's a headline. A title. It has our names, an abstract, which is the third circle down, keywords, and then the next part, the one that says the peak of post-feminism, right, is a subhead. Okay, so what I want you to do is to take your articles and your chapters. They may not always look like this. They could be chapters um, from a piece of literature. They could be things from a magazine that are being assigned to you. So this works for the most part with things that are academic journal articles, but elements of this could be used in other ways of reading. So the first way of doing the reading of the article is to honest to goodness read the title. Now a lot of people don't read titles. They just kind of glance at them and then move on. The titles are a lot more intentional than we think they are. There's a lot of work that goes into the titles. The titles hold keywords. The titles give us a sense of purpose and are things that should actually be taken into consideration before you read anything else. It basically should tell you everything you need to know about this article, for instance. So in this case, yes, the front part of it's a quote that's coming from a participant or a piece of data. Excuse me. That's in the article. But then the second part is giving you a sense that this is a feminist reading, that this is a critical piece because it says the word critique, right? Media, that it has to do with media, right? And a notion called industry speak, and it in being quotation marks leads us to believe that maybe that's a theoretical set or an idea or concept along with feminism, perhaps, that you should be paying attention to or that calls some attention for the rest of the reading. I highlight the authors. Now, these were a bunch of undergraduates at my last university, and we did this together, and we published this in Journalism Practice. But the reason here is it's important sometimes to go and look up who the authors are. Now, in this case, you may not want to look up all 8 of them or whatever, right? But you might want to know who wrote this. Where did they come from? Where did they study? Where are they teaching or doing research? What do people say about their background? So spending a few minutes going on even Wikipedia or something to find more information about who these people are can help position your first reading of the text in a landscape, right, within a paradigm, so that you know maybe even some debates about the author and what she or he have said about certain things in the world. So it's important to spend a few minutes trying to track down who is this author, what do I need to know about them, when was this written, right? Get some context to everything that you're reading, and that's really important. The next circle is, of course, the abstract, and we should be reading those. Sometimes that's text that appears elsewhere in the paper that's just being put up front to give us a sense of what we're reading and why we're reading it. And so that's pretty straightforward to read through. The keywords are also important. This is like SEO for for the database, right? So people again pick specific keywords that they want to align with other research, right? So they want to say, well, this is about feminist analysis, right? So that if people go in and they search for feminist analysis, they'll find this piece and other ones that have that SEO or that keyword. But it's also a signal to you, the reader, saying this is, again, a signal about what we want you to think of when you're reading this piece, that it's about these particular keywords in addition to everything else that it's there. So in this first reading, what I'm asking you to do is read all of these different sections and all of the subheads that are through it, which is the bottom circle. Go through and just read all of those. If there's a caption for a photograph or a chart, read that. Look at anything that's out of the ordinary. If there's a text that comes through that's in a block text or something that's not just part of the narrative, and sit back and think, okay, do I think I can tell somebody on the bus when we used to be on the bus, seeing that this is in the middle of a pandemic, but that I can tell somebody basically what this article is about. So if somebody says, yo, what's that about? You can say, well, I think the author is making an argument about X, Y, and Z. And you could be able to move yourself quickly through making some quick notes about what those arguments might be. And again, not all readings are going to have an abstract or keywords or subheads, right? So this process that I'm asking you to do, which is going to take you about 20% more time than what you're reading now, right? Probably. You'll get that back if you do this across all modules, or you do this all across your dissertations, or whatever it is, right? You'll get that time back because it's picking up a habit if it works for you. But even when you get to articles or readings that don't have all of these different dimensions and parts, pulling some of these strategies through would be really helpful. Okay. So let's say you've done round one. That didn't take very much time. Again, I'm not interested in if people are fast or slow learners. I don't even like those categorizations, right? But this is about being effective and efficient and getting the most out of your readings. Because a lot of people read them and then say, I don't know that I know exactly what that was about. This process won't solve that problem completely, but it'll get you much closer. Sorry, doing a lot of recordings today. So here is round two. Now, you've read all of the most important parts, at least the most visible parts, to get started. And now we're going into each paragraph. And again, in a Susan Sontag piece, for instance, or something that is more reflexive, or something that is more literary, this strategy may not work. But if it's a textbook piece, an article like this, or another piece of scholarly work that has a format that's resembled here, then this should work. Go in and read the first and last sentence of each paragraph by paragraph. Now, this goes back to when we first learned how to write. A paragraph has somewhere between 5 or 6 sentences, right? The first sentence is a topic sentence. It's supposed to tell you what's going on in that paragraph, what you're going to expect to see in that paragraph. And the last sentence, a concluding sentence, is to either do both actually. Summarize arguments that were made or summarize what's going on, end that section of that paragraph, and transition to some degree into the next topic sentence. So if we were to look at this second section on the right hand side, the first sentence of that paragraph is, we were especially struck by a consistency among how guest speakers defined the ideal professional and also identifies as being female. I'm sorry, who defined the ideal professional who also identifies as being female. So right now, you would have read a little bit that this was about people who had come into a session to talk about women in communication in the United States. You would have seen before that we're taking a critical perspective on the Lean In movement at the time by Sheryl Sandberg. And so this first sentence would say, oh, this is what they were interested in, right? They saw that there was a pattern to what the speakers were saying. And then at the end of that sentence, we say, moreover, this approach that women must not only engage in work but in heteronormative notions of family, a condition of popular post-feminism, has also placed women as key for overcoming inequality across the workforce, in addition to creating their own career success. Long sentence, right? Well, I write long sentences, and sometimes I shouldn't. But in that, you should have an understanding of that, okay, we are trying to make an argument here that might have to do with heteronormative notions of family, an idea of popular post-feminism, and maybe just now you think about highlighting a term, right? Maybe not the whole sentence, but a term within the sentence, right? Or if you found an argument, put an A next to it. Something like that in these readings. Now you go paragraph by paragraph. First sentence, last sentence, first sentence, last sentence. And by the time you get through that version of that round of reading, you will have a much better idea of what the argument is and maybe a little bit about the way they got to that argument. You may also have some things highlighted, but hopefully not a lot. You have the terms, you have the arguments, you have good topic sentences, because if we read it all at the same time, a lot of us get lost in what really the next round is, which is everything in between, right? So you have a topic sentence and a concluding sentence, and then here in the middle is the meat, it's the juice, it's the good stuff. This is the evidence. You've made some sort of statement or argument, now you're going to show it off. You're going to tell us how and why, then you're going to conclude and start again. And so now what I want you to do in this fourth round, or I guess it's the third round, sorry, is to read everything. So starting from the beginning, you've already read most of it, but it's good to just kind of scan the stuff you've read up until the first paragraph and then read everything, okay? It's very, very important to not get lost in those middle chunks of the paragraphs, right? But to identify the connections between paragraphs and each other, right? The arguments that you might have already identified. Maybe it's highlighting arguments in green in terms in yellow if you do color, or somehow other indicating why you're marking something rather than just marking everything up. Now, the middle circle I have here is my representation of the margins, okay? The white space that goes around the text. It's not there just for your thumbs. It is there for you to think about taking notes. Now, if you're taking notes and you accidentally write down what you need to get from the grocery store, that's okay. That actually shows me that while you're reading the text, you're not just writing about how does this relate maybe to another article that I found? I don't like this position, or I'm confused by this, or what do they mean here? Or, oh yes, this is another argument, right? Those are good things to write down. But if you need bananas and diapers and dog food, that shows me that you're engaging with the work, right? Because what this style of reading isn't addressing is everything else around you, whether you do better with music, silence, at a coffee shop with people talking, a TV in the background, with a light over your desk, with lights on all over the place. This isn't addressing those things, and that's part of figuring out where you want to study and where you want to read. But I'm talking about, once you're in the text, stay in the text. Because if you've done these stages so far, right, hopefully any anxiety about the reading has been diminished. And hopefully you're not overwhelmed with a bunch of text, because by now you probably know enough to go into a conversation without even reading the middle parts of the paragraphs. But those middle parts of the paragraphs, again, like I said, is the argument building, is the evidence, right? Are the things that draw to really good conversation, because the topic sentences alone are just a statement, right? And the concluding sentences alone are just a summary of sorts. That middle part's where it kind of gets a little harder for some people. So if you've read everything else and you go in, this isn't the first time you've actually read the document. You've read it twice already. Okay? Now you're just reading it for a different purpose. And be careful with the highlighter, right? Highlight things that you think are important. Draw arrows. Now this is me being probably old, where I printed things out. I still encourage people to print things out. If you're worried about the environment like I am, I appreciate that. But you've probably spent more time and done more damage to the environment by having the number of cell phones you've had in your life than by printing out something that will build your intellect, right? But if you can't print, that's also another issue. Find ways of using whatever program online that you're using to mark it up in a meaningful way so that it's not all marked up, right? So this is the third reading. You're going to read everything. You're going to take notes in the margins, maybe even on another sheet of paper, right? I always would do this reading, and then I'd have a tablet of sorts to write things down on next to me. And so that this document had some connections, but maybe if I wanted to make an added or longer note to myself, I'd put a 1 in a circle, and on that sheet of paper, I'd put a 1 in a circle, and I'd write some things, right? That's how you can engage with your reading. Again, it takes a little bit longer, but you walk away with a better understanding of the reading and less anxiety about it, okay? And I think that's really great. Now, here's the fourth and final round. This is where, remember I just mentioned that tablet on the side, right? This is where you take all of the notes that you put in the margins, right, around the side, some of the highlighting things, not a lot, and you put them onto a clean sheet of paper. And maybe you merge those comments with any other comments that you had. So at the end of the day, you have one sheet of paper that has anything that's defined with a page number in that reading. You have any comments about other readings you need to remember about. You have questions that you want to ask. And maybe you have your grocery list, right? And so this document will really help you if you're going to define ideology, for instance, in a reading, meaning in the service of power, right? You're going to put on that ideology, meaning in the service of power. But later, when you get to an assessment or you get to a time when you need to engage with this more, or the next time you come across ideology with that definition, maybe all you need to write is ideology because you've remembered the definition of it, because you're not busy trying to figure out everything else that's in the article and you found 3 or 4 things that have come from it. So that goes on that sheet. In those sheets, right? Let's say you have 6 chapters over the term that you're going to read, right? You have 6 sheets. At the very end, when you get done, then maybe you go back to those 6 sheets and you say, all right, what are the key things that I need to take from these 6 sheets? What are the key 10 things I need to take from these 6 chapters? And you put that on another sheet of paper, right? Now this sounds very redundant and this sounds like a lot of busy work, but it's not. Well, it is redundant on purpose, actually. It is for you to engage with the readings and not see them as separate from lectures, workshops, and seminars. It's making it a very big part of your life and puts meaning to it and purpose to it. And that at the end of the day, that one sheet of paper at the end of the term or semester, right, has the 10 things just from the readings, not even notes from other things, but you have a good, solid document that represents your understanding of the readings. So anyway, this is my idea for how you can prepare with your readings, and I hope that it's helpful, and please reach out if you have any questions about that.